grade 5. This is Mr. B, and we're just going to be doing one final science review just to get us all back up to date. And so today we're doing science review, changes in matter, physical changes versus chemical change, and a little bit on recycling as well, because we talked about that. So yeah, I have a kind of a funny Russian tongue. So what is change? Well, change is kind of like, going from one state of affairs to another. So in our lives, there's always change, right? We have to deal with change a lot more recently. And we can think of the change that occurred at Lindisfarne. Right? They had a nice peaceful thing going on there at the farm, or at the nice monastery, and then it got all burned down. And then, everyone sort of died. So yeah, that is what that is. Oh, now I can't skip through this. So we're going to have to look at this again quite awkwardly. But yeah, so yeah, these little Viking ships sailing on up here. And it probably made quite a bit of change for our poor little monks, and everything started lighting on fire, and it's all crazy, and then, they all fall over and die. And yeah, so that's like change, right? When you have something happens to something else and it causes a change. And so every day there's change. Recently in our lives with the COVID-19 stuff, we've had a lot of change. And we're constantly dealing with changes in plans and changes in other things. So yeah, as we move on, we'll talk about more sciencey stuff. But here. So what's physical change? Well, physical change is when matter changes its state, but still the same substance. And it can also be like if something about it is changed because it got smacked or something. But as long as it's still the same thing, then it hasn't actually, its physical characteristics have changed, but it's still the same stuff. So when water turns to ice, it is still the same water, but it's frozen. And when when ice turns to water, it is still the same stuff. It's just not frozen. And so this polar bear, as much as he's complaining that all the ice is just gone, which is true, he still has water, so he shouldn't be complaining too much. That's just a joke. But yeah, and when we cut firewood, you also have the same sort of idea, right? You have the wood is getting split, and then you are the wood is still wood though, right? It's not changing into something else. So chemical change occurs when atoms or molecules begin to form a completely new substance. So when logs burn, right, or a roof starts to rust, what's happening is they actually are it's changing what is there, right? So the wood, when it burns, it becomes ash. Now, ash is not wood anymore. It's something totally different. It's totally new. Now, it obviously used up some of the elements from the wood, but a lot of it's different. It has changed, and you can't just cool it down and now it will turn into logs again, unlike what is the case when you have an ice cube. On the other hand, rust is the same thing, right? When you get rust on your car, you can't just heat it up or cool it down to get it off or to change it back. No, rust is there. It's a whole new thing that's on it. And now you have to scrape it off or sand it off or do something to it to do it. So chemical change is a change that occurs when it changes its actual substance. So something completely changes. So yeah, we have physical change, which is change of state, shape, or size, and chemical change, which is a change of substance, right? It actually changes what it is. So that is a big thing. Now, we're talking about a lot of things that we use. So this is just going quickly here. What happens to matter when we are done using it? Well, we use materials every day in our lives, right? We use lots of things, from Coke cans to juice boxes to wrappers to chocolate wrappers. Even some things that last a bit longer, right? Shoes and books, sometimes even they get sent to Salvation Army or they're not useful anymore. Candle holders, all sorts of different things that we use, and then eventually they run out. Even old electronics, right? So my old computers, they also eventually they die, and then I have to deal with them somehow. And clothing as well, right? All this stuff has to be dealt with. And so we have to think about what should we do with it when we're done using it. So I think I believe it's our Christian duty to be stewards, right? So God has given us dominion over the world, and we need to take care of it. Now, some people You don't really understand, what the Bible teaches. They think of this dominion word as aggressive, but they fail to understand what Christians mean by dominion. Right? We look at our Lord Jesus, and he was a servant, right? And he cared for his people, and he was humble. And so when God calls us to be leaders, right? He's not calling us to be a leader in the way that the Gentiles are leader, where they command and abuse and just get other people to do it. He calls us to be servant leaders, right? To look after and to care and to nourish. And so, to be more like a shepherd than a general or a commander, right? So we are supposed to have dominion over all of the world, right? We have to care for it and take care of it and look after it, and that is dominion. We have control over it, right? And so, I think it especially means that we should be careful that we are not abusing it ourselves, right? And also trying to make sure other people aren't abusing it. But sometimes, right, this can be a little bit tricky because we are also called to love our neighbor, right? And there's some parts of the world where people are just really, really poor, right? And oftentimes, people who live in richer countries can sort of expect that poorer people do just what they think is best. But sometimes it's very expensive to do all these things that would be better for the planet, and they can actually hurt the people in a sense, right? So, and a lot of times they're also doing a better job because they have less things. So especially this comes to when we talk about energy later, right? There's countries in Africa in particular, and they need to use they want to have some of the goods that we have, and if we demand that they do it in certain ways, sometimes this can be unloving because we can make them have their life be substantially harder in a way that's detrimental to their livelihoods. So we have to always be careful. We have to hold things carefully, right? As Christians, we have to think about things and take situations. We have to really think about things and not be dogmatic in a sense about things like this. And also, a part of the reason why people sometimes do get kind of fanatical about the world is because they don't believe in a God. Now, we believe that we should look after creation, but we don't believe that creation is everything, right? We believe that creation is created, and we also believe in the hope and promise that one day our Lord will recreate everything and renew everything. And so the world will be made afresh, that this world is a fallen world. And so a big part of the problem with why the world is abused is because of sin and fall and greed. And so we understand that the bigger problem is people's sin. And also we can have the hope that a lot of green activists don't get. They're very, very worried and anxious. And sometimes, and we can feel we should pray for them, that they also would come to see the Lord, and that the Lord would take away their anxiety, and that they could rest in the Lord's grace. Now, that rest doesn't mean that we don't do anything. We also want to do things for the world, but we come at it from a different perspective, right? One that trusts in the Lord, and one that is not thinking that we can do everything on our own, but we rest in the Lord's strength to renew the earth. And so that's a different perspective. So, right, we have to be stewards, but we don't have to be anxious. And we also have to remember that it's our first duty to love our neighbors, right? And yes, of course, a lot of times these coincide, right? Making a place cleaner is oftentimes better for your neighbors, right? It's better not to dump things out. And we also have to think that when we as Canadians send garbage overseas to other people, that's hurting our neighbors, right? And our neighbors in this case are people around the world. But it's hurting them. And so we should be careful with what we do and how we live, right? We don't need to have anxiety or anxiousness or worry. We don't need to be super worried about this because it's in the Lord's hands ultimately, and He will renew the earth. So that's our duty. So often we have this reduce, reuse, recycle, and I think it's a great way of thinking of things, right? So we live in a world where things just buying stuff all the time, and a lot of people buy a lot of stuff they don't need. And so that's the idea of reduce. Back in the day, most people didn't have that much, so we didn't. You wouldn't buy lots of things, and so we often buy more things than we actually need. So you can probably find things around your house that no one has really used much. And I know we can. Sometimes you have stuff in your basement that has just sat there for like decades. So I know that like our house, we had things in our basement that just sat around for decades. And so that's the thing that a lot of people, kind of make they make the mistake and they buy things that they don't really need. And so, as my dad always used to tell me when I wanted stuff, he said, "Waste not, want not." So that was his little saying. But it's actually a pretty good little saying, right? We don't want to make waste, and we don't want to just want things, right? You focus more on what you need, and sometimes you can get things that you want, but there's a lot of things that we can live without. And so it's good if we can reduce what we are actually consuming, then we can. We can pollute less just by that. Now, once you have the stuff, we have to think about how we could reuse it rather than just chuck it out, right? So it's so easy to throw something in the garbage can, and it's a bit harder to think about what we can use this thing to, like whatever we've used again, or how can maybe someone else can use it. So maybe instead of just throwing your clothing out, maybe you could instead, like maybe a sock even, you could cut up the sock and maybe use it in some other way. Who knows, even a blanket or something. I'm not necessarily sure myself what you'd use, but right, I know some of the girls in our class instantly went about reusing garbage. So even garbage, things that people like absolutely think there's no use for, like wrappers and stuff, you can make bags and all sorts of things. And it's really good if you can reuse it yourself, right? Because we watch those videos about recycling, and recycling is good. Finally, if you really can't find any other way to do it, recycling is our best last resort, right? We can send it to the recyclers, and if the stuff is possible to recycle, they'll be able to recycle it and use it again in other products. Now, we did see our video that a lot of things that go to recycling end up in dump yards anyways, and we want to try and avoid this. So as little as we can recycle as possible. Well, we want to recycle much more than we throw out in the garbage, but if we if we can try and avoid even recycling that much and actually just reusing things on our own and avoiding even having things that need to be recycled and maybe buying things in and reusing containers and stuff, and that would always be our first rule. So, right, we want to reduce, reuse, and recycle, right? The first thing we want to do is try and reduce how much stuff we have. Then we want to reuse and recycle. So that's the basic lesson for today. Tomorrow we'll be moving on, and this is again just review. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed today's lesson, and I hope you're able to have fun and learn some things. Anyways, guys, peace. Cheers. Bye.